My beloved child. The person connected to your heart did something they never imagined they would admit to you. They went looking for answers about your past. Not because they believed you were dangerous. Not because someone had given them proof that you had lied. In fact, that was what made their decision so difficult to justify afterward. There was no evidence against you. There was only a growing collection of questions they had never been brave enough to ask while they still had easy access to your heart. Why did you become quiet whenever people spoke about childhood? Why could you forgive certain mistakes almost immediately, yet completely withdraw when someone made you feel replaceable? Why did you sometimes look uncomfortable when they promised, "I'm not going anywhere," as if promises like that frightened you more than silence? And most of all, why had you loved them with such tenderness while keeping one particular room inside yourself locked? For months, they convinced themselves they did not care. Everyone has a past. You were entitled to yours. But curiosity began changing shape after the distance between you grew. It became insecurity. Then suspicion. Then something uglier. They started wondering whether there had been someone before them you had never truly gotten over. Perhaps an old relationship explained why part of you always seemed prepared for goodbye. Maybe somebody had hurt you so deeply that your soulmate had unknowingly spent the relationship competing with a person who was no longer even present. Instead of asking you, they filled the empty spaces themselves. That had always been one of their worst habits. When information frightened them, imagination became their evidence. There had been opportunities to ask. Once, the two of you had been sitting together when a conversation nearby turned toward childhood memories. Someone laughed about being embarrassed by old family photographs. Your soulmate smiled and asked, almost casually, "What were you like when you were little?" You became still for barely a second. It was small enough that another person might have missed it. They did not. Then you smiled. Quieter. They waited for more. Nothing came. They could have asked what that silence meant. Instead, they changed the subject because they sensed that continuing might make you uncomfortable. At the time, they told themselves they were respecting you. Later, after everything between you became complicated, they began replaying that moment differently. Maybe you were hiding something. That thought embarrassed them. But it remained. Eventually, someone mentioned a woman who called herself a psychic. Your soulmate nearly laughed. They were not the kind of person who normally trusted strangers with candles, cards, intuition, or mysterious claims about unseen things. They had always considered themselves practical. They wanted facts. Explanations. Things they could touch. But grief makes people negotiate with beliefs they once dismissed. And losing emotional access to you had created a peculiar grief. You were still somewhere in the world. Still living your life. Still waking in the morning and moving through ordinary days. Yet they no longer knew what you were thinking. That absence became unbearable precisely because they could not call it a complete ending. So they made an appointment. They told themselves they only wanted clarity. The woman surprised them almost immediately. She did not ask for your full history. She did not promise to reveal secret dates, hidden names, or dramatic predictions. Instead, after listening to your soulmate speak for a while, she leaned back and asked a question. Why are you trying to investigate someone you were once close enough to simply ask? Your soulmate felt irritation rise instantly. I tried. Did you? Yes. The woman watched them. What did you ask? Your soulmate opened their mouth. Nothing came. Because suddenly they could remember all the questions they had asked you that were not really questions. Why are you acting like this? Why do you always shut down? Why can't you just trust me? What is wrong with you? Questions designed to defend themselves rather than understand you. They had rarely asked, "What happened to you?" And almost never, "What do you need from me when you become afraid?" The realization made them uncomfortable. Still, they had come for an answer, and eventually they said, "There's something about their past. I can feel it." The woman did not immediately respond. She asked your soulmate to tell her about you. Not your birthday. Not signs. Not mystical details. She asked about your behavior. What made you retreat? What made you feel safe? What happened before the distance started? Your soulmate described things they had almost forgotten. The way you noticed when their voice changed. How you could tell they were upset before they admitted it. How you remembered tiny details people usually ignored. How you rarely demanded reassurance, but seemed deeply affected when reassurance was offered and later withdrawn. They remembered an argument when your soulmate had said something cruel because they felt cornered. "I can't keep proving myself to you." You went silent. Not angry. Silent. They expected you to fight back. Instead, you simply said, "I never asked you to prove yourself." At the time, they thought you were being defensive. Now the memory sounded different. The psychic asked, "What happened after that?" You changed. How? You stopped asking things. What things? Your soulmate stared toward the floor. You had stopped asking when they would call. Stopped asking whether plans were still happening. Stopped asking whether something was wrong when their messages became shorter. Stopped asking where the relationship was going. Your soulmate had once interpreted this as emotional maturity. Less pressure. Less conflict. Freedom. They had not understood that you were slowly teaching yourself to live without expecting anything from them. The woman became quiet. Then she said, "I think you're looking for a dramatic secret because the ordinary truth would require more accountability." That sentence landed harder than your soulmate expected. They almost ended the conversation there. They had paid to understand you, not to be examined themselves. But something kept them seated. Perhaps because beneath the defensiveness, they knew she had touched something real. What ordinary truth? The woman looked at the notes she had made while they talked. Then she said something your soulmate would remember long after leaving that room. "I don't think the central mystery in this person's past is who they loved before you." Your soulmate looked up. "I think it is how early they learned not to depend on anyone staying." They froze. Not because the sentence sounded magical. Because it sounded familiar. You had once said almost the same thing. Not dramatically. Not during an argument. It had happened in one of those quiet moments people underestimate while they are living them. The two of you had been talking about moving, changing jobs, people drifting apart. Your soulmate had joked that you seemed strangely calm whenever life changed suddenly. You shrugged. "I learned early not to get too comfortable with people staying." They laughed lightly and replied, "That's depressing." You smiled. Maybe. Then the conversation moved on. They had forgotten it. You had not. The woman continued carefully. Some people grow up believing love means stability. Others grow up believing love can be real and still disappear. Those people can love very deeply, but they watch exits. Your soulmate's hands went cold. A memory surfaced. Whenever the two of you entered unfamiliar places, you often noticed the door. Whenever conflict became intense, you did not scream. You prepared to leave. Whenever someone disappointed you repeatedly, there was a point when something inside you seemed to switch off. They had called it coldness. The psychic called it preparation. And then came the sentence that made your soulmate stop breathing for a moment. You keep asking who this person really is. She paused. They are someone who learned to survive being left before they ever learned how to ask someone to stay. Your soulmate stared at her. There it was. The answer hidden inside the title they had secretly created about your life. You are not the mysterious person they had imagined. Not someone hiding a forbidden romance. Not someone secretly manipulating them. You are someone whose earliest understanding of love may have included disappearance. And suddenly a dozen memories rearranged themselves. There had been a night when your soulmate disappeared emotionally for hours after an argument. They wanted space. Nothing wrong with that. But they did not tell you. They simply stopped responding. When they returned, you were calm. Too calm. I needed time, they said. I understand. You don't sound like you understand. I do. You're upset. No. Then you added quietly, next time just tell me you need space. Don't make me wonder if you're gone. They had rolled their eyes. You always think the worst. You looked at them for a long moment. I know. That should have been the beginning of a conversation. Instead, your soulmate treated it as a flaw you needed to correct. Now they wondered what you might have told them if they had asked the obvious question. Why? Why does silence feel like disappearance to you? Why does uncertainty hurt you more than bad news? Why do you need to know someone is coming back? They remembered another moment. A family gathering had been mentioned, and you quietly said you probably would not attend. Your soulmate pushed. Why not? It's complicated. Everything with your family is complicated. You did not answer. They thought you were being secretive. Later, somebody made an innocent joke about parents keeping embarrassing childhood belongings. Your face changed. Only for a moment. Then you excused yourself. Your soulmate found you outside. They asked if you were okay. You said yes. They believed the word instead of the person saying it. Sitting across from the psychic, your soulmate finally understood something painful. You had not hidden everything. You had offered fragments. Carefully. Quietly. In sentences small enough to withdraw if they were not handled gently. And too often, those fragments had landed in hands that did not understand their weight. The psychic did not claim to know exactly what happened to you. That mattered. She did not invent tragedy where none had been confirmed. She simply said, whatever the details are, there is a pattern here. This person seems to expect affection to become unstable. And if you repeatedly gave closeness and then withdrew it, you may have stepped into an old wound without knowing it. Your soulmate immediately defended themselves. I never abandoned them. Maybe not physically. I loved them. I believe you. I was overwhelmed sometimes. That can also be true. Something in your soulmate softened because she was not turning them into a villain. She was doing something harder. She was allowing two truths to exist together. Your soulmate may have loved you. And they may still have hurt you. They may have needed space. And the way they took that space may have activated fears they did not understand. You may have had old wounds. And it was never their responsibility to magically heal all of them. But once your soulmate recognized where they were stepping, continuing to step there carelessly would become a choice. The conversation should have ended with that realization. Instead, your soulmate asked one more question. Why didn't they just tell me? The woman looked almost sad. Maybe they tried. Silence. Your soulmate hated that answer because memory immediately supplied evidence. You had tried after one particularly painful argument. They remembered you sitting beside them, struggling to find the right words. I don't need constant attention, you said. I need consistency. Those aren't the same thing. Your soulmate was already frustrated. So now I'm inconsistent. That's not what I said. It sounds like what you said. You took a breath. This is why I stopped talking. At the time, that sentence made them angry. Now it made their stomach turn. Because they finally heard the meaning underneath it. You had not stopped talking because you had nothing to say. You stopped because every vulnerable sentence seemed to become evidence in a trial you never meant to start. When your soulmate left the session, they were not suddenly transformed. That would make this an easier story. Human beings rarely change because of one conversation. At first they became defensive. They drove away telling themselves the psychic was only repeating information they had provided. Perhaps anyone could have reached similar conclusions. Perhaps the entire meeting had been foolish. They even considered laughing about it with someone later. But embarrassment has a strange way of following people home. That evening, they opened an old conversation between the two of you. Not to contact you. Just to look. They scrolled backward. There were jokes. Photographs. Ordinary conversations that once seemed endless. Then they noticed something. In the earlier messages, you asked for connection freely. Are we still on for later? Call me when you get home. Did I do something? Can we talk about yesterday? Then gradually, your messages changed. No worries. It's fine. Whenever you're free. Don't worry about it. Take care. Your soulmate kept scrolling. They could almost watch you disappear without leaving. There was no single dramatic goodbye. Just fewer expectations. Fewer questions. Fewer attempts to repair what hurt. And the cruelest realization was this. They had mistaken your surrender for peace. Your soulmate had once told a friend, "Things are finally easier between us." They now understood why. You had stopped bringing them the parts of you that required care. Not because you stopped having needs. Because you stopped expecting those needs to matter. That night, they wrote you a message. Then deleted it. The first version said, "I talked to someone about you." Delete. The second, "I think I finally understand you." Delete. That sounded arrogant. How could one stranger, one conversation, one evening of old messages give them the right to claim they understood a lifetime you had actually lived? They tried again. "I owe you an apology." Their thumb hovered. Then they deleted that too. Not because it was false. Because your soulmate began realizing an apology sent at the wrong moment can become another demand. Read this. Respond to me. Relieve my guilt. Tell me I am forgiven. They did not want to turn your pain into the place where they came for comfort. So for once, they did nothing. And doing nothing felt different this time. Before, silence had been avoidance. Now it became restraint. They kept thinking about what the psychic had said. Someone who learned to survive being left before they learned how to ask someone to stay. Your soulmate wondered when that lesson entered your life. Perhaps there was no single dramatic event. Maybe it happened slowly. Promises that changed. Adults who were inconsistent. Affection that depended on behavior. Someone leaving. Someone returning as though nothing happened. A home where emotions were inconvenient. Or perhaps your history was entirely different. They finally understood they did not have the right to invent the missing pieces. That had been the original mistake. They wanted an explanation so badly that they had created one. The mysterious X. The secret betrayal. The hidden motive. Anything except the possibility that your behavior made perfect emotional sense when viewed through experiences you had never felt safe enough to fully describe. Days passed. Your soulmate began recognizing their own history too. That was the part they had not expected. They had always thought of themselves as the more secure one. But when someone came close enough to truly need them, they often felt trapped. Requests sounded like criticism. Vulnerability sounded like pressure. Conflict made them withdraw. They had spent years calling it independence. Now they wondered whether they had simply learned a different survival strategy than you. You feared being abandoned. They feared being consumed. So the relationship created a painful rhythm neither of you consciously designed. When you sensed distance, you reached for clarity. When they sensed your need for clarity, they felt pressured and stepped back. Their retreat frightened you. Your fear made them retreat further. Eventually you stopped reaching. And only after you became quiet did they finally feel safe enough to miss you. It was almost unbearably sad. Two people protecting old injuries while believing they were protecting themselves from each other. Your soulmate eventually returned to the message they had saved and erased repeatedly. This time, they wrote something simpler. "I've been thinking about the times you tried to tell me what hurt you. I kept defending what I meant instead of listening to what you experienced. I understand now that those are not the same thing." They stopped. Read it again. Added. "I don't know everything about your past, and I realize I had no right to fill in the parts you didn't share. You can tell me someday if you ever want to. You never owe me that story." Their chest tightened. There was still one thing they wanted to say. The most difficult thing. "I'm sorry I made your fear of being left feel unreasonable while giving you reasons to wonder whether I would stay emotionally present." They did not send it immediately. For the first time, they asked themselves a question they should have asked much earlier. Would contacting you help you? Or would it only help them? That distinction mattered now. They imagined your phone lighting up with their name. Maybe your heart would race. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe you had healed enough that their name no longer controlled the temperature of your day. They did not know. And not knowing was something they would have to tolerate. Because love, they were beginning to understand, did not grant automatic access. Regret did not create entitlement. Understanding someone after hurting them did not obligate that person to return and reward the understanding. The psychic had not promised a reunion. She had actually said something your soulmate initially did not want to hear. Knowing why someone pulled away does not tell you whether they should come back. That line stayed with them. It meant the next step could not be built from fantasy. Your soulmate would have to become more honest whether you ever witnessed that change or not. And perhaps that is the deepest thing they uncovered while searching your past. They went looking for the secret that explained you. Instead, they found the behavior that explained the distance between you. They went hoping to discover whether you were hiding something. Instead, they discovered how often you had revealed yourself in small ways they were too defensive to notice. They wanted to know who you had loved before. They ended up facing how you had been loved before, and how those earlier experiences may have shaped what safety meant to you. But there was one final realization. It came not from the psychic. Not from the old messages. Not from some mystical sign. It came from remembering the last real conversation between you. Your soulmate had asked, "So you're just done?" You were quiet for a long moment. Then you said, "I don't know." They became angry. How can you not know? You looked exhausted rather than cold. Because loving someone and feeling safe with them became two different things. Your soulmate remembered exactly how those words affected them. They had focused on the first part. You still loved them. That gave them hope. They had barely heard the second. Now it was the only part they could hear. Feeling safe. That was what the entire story had been about. Not perfect behavior. Not constant reassurance. Not never needing space. Safety meant knowing disagreement would not automatically become disappearance. Knowing vulnerability would not be mocked. Knowing a difficult question could be answered without punishment. Knowing someone's love would not continually be used as proof that they should tolerate uncertainty. Your soulmate finally understood why you could love them and still leave. Leaving had not necessarily meant your feelings died. Perhaps something inside you simply became tired of surviving love. And that was what made them freeze when they heard what the psychic believed she could see beneath your past. You are not cold. You are not impossible to love. You are not secretly waiting for someone else. In this story, you are someone who learned far too early that people can care for you and still disappear, promise things and still change, hold you close and still become unreachable. So eventually, you learned something else. If you feel abandonment approaching, you start abandoning expectation first. Not because it hurts less. Because at least then you can choose the moment the hoping stops. Your soulmate understands that now. But understanding arrived after consequence. There is no guarantee that it will bring you back. Maybe that message will eventually reach you. Maybe your soulmate will decide the kindest thing is to leave it unsent and let their change speak through whatever life they build next. Maybe you will meet again when neither of you needs the other person to become proof that you have healed. And perhaps, if that happens, the conversation will be quieter than either of you once imagined. No dramatic declarations. No promises that nothing will ever go wrong. Just two imperfect people sitting with the truth. One finally able to say, "I should have asked instead of assuming." And the other finally free to decide whether answering still feels right. Because the secret your soulmate went searching for was never simply hidden in your past. It was hidden in the way your past entered the room whenever love became uncertain. And now, at last, they can see what they once misunderstood. You were never asking someone to rescue you from what happened before them. You were asking them not to recreate it. That difference changed everything. Not because it guarantees another beginning, but because whether the road brings the two of you together again or carries you toward completely separate lives, one truth can finally remain untouched. The part of you that learned to survive goodbye was never evidence that you were incapable of love. If anything, the tragedy was that you kept loving while quietly preparing to lose what you loved. And somewhere, the person who once mistook that preparation for distance is finally sitting with the weight of what it really meant. This time, they are not searching for another secret. They are learning how to listen to the truth they already had.